Today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
Always chase your childhood dreams. Don't give up on them, because those are the dreams that you had before the world told you what you should be doing and before you became an adult. That was when your imagination went rampant, and you just absolutely have to take the bull by the horns and just do it. Best advice I can give is chase your childhood dreams.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Gina Marie Agderian. Gina is a New Jersey-based independent author who self-published her first novel in April 2018, titled The Letters in the Old House. She holds a bachelor's degree in English and an MBA from Fairleigh Dickinson University. She is of the belief that you must be an avid reader to become a great writer, and she loves to encourage others to chase their childhood dreams. Gina, welcome to the podcast.
Carolyn, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, happy to have you here. So tell me, how did you first become interested in writing a novel?
So I've always been really interested in writing and reading. When I was a child, my mom would read to me, and I actually learned to read because I memorized all of my favorite books. You would point to all the words, and I would just memorize the words, and eventually that's how I learned to read. And as far back as I can remember, just knowing how to read, I always wanted to write something. And, I just kept putting it off and putting it off. Life gets in the way. I'm in college, and then I want to finish college. And then I was like, all right, after I get my master's degree, and I finished that, and after I get my first full-time job, and after I get married and buy a house, and I accomplished all of that. And I'm sitting there going, well, what's stopping me now from writing? So with my husband's encouragement, because I kept complaining about it for so many years, and I just never had time to do it, he said, well, just do it. So I started writing, and I just kept plugging away. But it was always a dream I had since as far back as I can remember. And I finally just got enough courage to do it and set enough time aside to accomplish it.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of people can relate to having a childhood dream and knowing that you wanted to do something very early in your life, but life kind of gets in the way sometimes, and you have a hard time, you get busy. But it's wonderful that you, with the encouragement of your husband, finally went to publish your first novel. I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I would complain because I would sit there like, oh, I wish I had done this earlier. I wish I blah, 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 and he would say to me, just do it. Just sit down and just do it. And I did. So his encouragement definitely helped. I think I probably wouldn't have completed it as quickly if it weren't for his encouragement. So certainly that played a big part in it, but just sitting down and getting the courage to do it and to figure it out on my own, with all the support I had, it really made the process a whole lot easier.
All right, that's great. So as we said in your introduction, your first novel is called The Letters in the Old House. What's it about, and what inspired you to write that specific book as your first novel?
I have been vacationing, as most Jersey girls have. I've been vacationing down the shore since as far back as I can remember. I have so many memories down there. And the novel actually takes place in a fictitious town called Ocean Corner. And it is a story about a young woman who she's an adult, but she's at that crossroads of really becoming who she's meant to be and really figuring her life out. Her boyfriend unexpectedly dumped her. She was kind of like, all right, now what do I do? And she gets the opportunity to stay down the shore for the summer with her aunt and uncle in their beautiful home and work in their restaurant that they own. And it's just a summer down the shore. I think a lot of her experiences are very relatable to especially people who have vacationed on the shore, but just in general to anybody. Being young, going out, meeting people and doing different things, experiencing different things. And that really, I think, resonates with a lot of people. I've had older people, my parents' age and older. My parents are, in their 50s and 60s, and people older, my grandparents have read it. Mm-hmm. And they say it's just so relatable no matter what age you're at. because everybody's gone through a lot of what she's experienced, the main character, Penny, at some point. So a lot of my personal experiences, as well as just things in general that I think anybody can relate to, were all tied into that novel. And a lot of it was just so based on my experiences at the Jersey Shore. And every time I go down there, I'm like, oh, I'm doing research. I'm laying on the beach doing some research for my book. So it made it so much fun to just, as I'm writing it, feel like I'm there, because I'm imagining this all in my head, and I'm imagining what she's doing and how she's feeling, and the characters and how they're interacting with each other. And it just made that experience so much more pleasant, because I got to, in my brain, even though I'm in Bergen County, New Jersey, I'm able to actually be down the shore and, in my head, in my imagination.
I'd imagine a lot of people who are from New Jersey, that is a big thing to go down to the shore. So that's really a part of the culture in this part of the country. So I could imagine a lot of people really being able to relate and kind of picture themselves in that world as they're reading your book.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you're outside of the tri-state area, any place that you vacation to as a kid or as a young adult, or just being young, that's really what the novel's all about. It's about figuring yourself out. It's about not always agreeing with your parents or what your parents think you should be doing, and trying to figure yourself out. So just having that experience of crossing over from that threshold of sort of adolescence, young adulthood, into full-fledged adulthood. And that's what a lot of the novel centers around.
So how would you classify the genre of the novel? Because as if I understand correctly, there's a bit of a mystery element in there as well. Is that correct?
Yes. So it is a little bit of a mystery. So part of Penny, the main character, Penny, part of her, I would say, plight in the novel is to figure out what's going on with these letters that keep appearing in her aunt and uncle's beach house. So she just has these letters that are magically appearing out of nowhere, and she's trying to figure out who wrote the letters, what they mean, what time period they're from, what happened to the people who wrote the letters. So it's a lot of she's figuring out a mystery, but also figuring herself out in the process. So it's kind of a twofold plot line, so to speak. She's dead set on figuring out what happened to these people and figuring out with the clues, what she's been gathering, what they mean, and learning from the people that she's met in Ocean Corner, because she meets new people, and she's trying to piece together what everybody knows to figure out ultimately what the mystery behind those letters are.
Wow. Yeah, that's really intriguing. Yeah. And I see how the plot lines tie together in terms of figuring out where the letters are coming from and what they mean. And then, Penny having a chance to figure out the changes in her life as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of parallels, I think, between her and what was going on with the letters. So she's kind of learning as she goes along, and the ending kind of ties everything up in a nice, neat bow.
Cool. So you mentioned before that you kind of had this book in you, or this desire to write, and the advice you were taking was to just do it and just get started. So once you decided to move forward, what was your process for writing your first book? So
I always say, if you ever want to write anything, regardless of if it's something for work that you have to type up, that's kind of a document, like not just pulling a report, but a document of some sort that you have to type up, or it's a book, or if it's a blog post or anything, I'm a strong advocate of outlines. So I always create an outline. And for a while, my writing process always starts really with just thinking about my book. I'm always whatever I'm working on, I'm always thinking about it, whether I'm driving to work or I'm getting ready to go to sleep or whatever it is that I'm doing. I'm always kind of fixing and tweaking things in my brain. My brain is constantly going. Once I have that all figured out, I sit down, I get a nice notebook, and I start outlining everything. And I started creating what I wanted to happen in each chapter. And, it changes as you start creating your book or your piece. Sometimes things will change, but having an outline, once you have an outline for something, the piece writes itself basically. And you change things along the way, as I said, and things may get shifted a little bit, or you add things, you remove things, but it's such a good, solid foundation to start with. So once you have that outline and you're writing, it goes so much easier. So, I mean, I would write after work because I do work a 9-to-5 job. So I'll write after work. The weekends are really big for me because I can devote really big chunks of time to just sitting and writing. I do have a home office. I'm lucky enough to have a home office, and I'm able to just sit there with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with a nice candle burning and just crank out what I need to crank out and take breaks. So it's really just having that foundation. I don't just sit at the computer and go, okay, I'm going to write. It really has to be intentional as far as what I'm going to say, what piece I'm working on, having that outline done. And that's really, like, that outline is my Bible, because if I lose that, I lose the whole story and I have to start over. So it's really, really important to have that and to take breaks. Some people, I think a lot of authors think, or maybe even first-time authors like myself, because when I first started, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should sit and do it for hours and hours and just not get up. But to me, that's not healthy, because you have to get away from the screen. You have to get away from the world that you're creating. It's like being at work, you want to get up, you want to stretch, you want to maybe go for a walk, you come back to your desk and you have a fresh perspective. So I don't sit generally for long periods of time. If I'm working for maybe an hour, let's say, I'll get up, maybe I'll do a load of laundry, maybe I will just watch a little television and then go back to it. So taking those breaks, it's so important, because you don't want to burn yourself out and put that pressure like, oh my God, I got to get this done. I got to get this done by a certain time. I go at my own pace and I don't try to push myself. Like, if I feel like I'm done for the day, I'm done. I'm not going to sit there and try to force anything out of me, because I may end up deleting it the next time I sit down. So quality over quantity for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, and how long did it take you from beginning to end to write this book?
So I did start it a few years ago, and then I put it on the back burner because I was busy planning my wedding, and I was busy buying a house, and I was doing other stuff. As I mentioned earlier, life unfortunately got in the way. I would say once I really started getting going with it, it was about another, I would say, 9 to 10 months before I was finally able to really get it to where I wanted it to be and then ultimately publish it. So I really just plugged away at it and made it a priority. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see my friends as much as I would like to and spend as much time with my family, but it was a priority at that point. So once I really started getting going with it and finishing it, I would say, it was a little under a year.
And you mentioned when you were describing your process at first, after you had gone through it and thought about it, that you grabbed a notebook and started your outline. And then, of course, you're typing on the computer when you're writing out the actual book itself. I'm curious if there's a time that you feel like it's important to handwrite as part of the writing process, and other times it's more important to type on the computer. Do you experience a difference in terms of your creative process or your productivity in handwriting versus typing?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because in today's world, everything's so digital. So everything we do is pretty digitized. Everything's on your phone or your laptop or your television. So my outlines are always on paper. I go to Home Goods. I get the prettiest notebook I can find, because I feel like, I don't know, for women, and maybe it's different for men, they don't care, but for women, we like pretty stuff. We like nice stuff. I want to feel good about what I'm writing in. So I go to Home Goods or Marshalls or wherever, and I pick up a nice notebook, and my outline is all done by hand. Like, if you look at any of my outlines for anything, it's always in a notebook or it's on a piece of paper, because I don't know, it just feels weird to me if I type it up versus writing it out. Like, I don't know, I can't explain it, but there's just something about writing it, having a nice pen, writing on a nice piece of paper and just jotting everything down, jotting ideas down, and really just kind of, it's almost like journaling to me when I start making my outline, and I journal in a paper journal. So I like the feel of having the pen in my hand and the paper under the pen and like the smell of the notebook and everything. It's like very sensory versus sitting at a computer and just typing up my outline. I like having it in front of me for reference. I like being able to just sit there, and if I think of something, I can just grab the notebook and jot it down or cross something out or change something. So it's that ease of access. It's the whole feeling of having the notebook in my hand. And I love seeing my outline, and I'm looking at notes that I've made and then seeing a final product and seeing how far I've come, because that outline essentially created my entire piece, whatever I was writing. So yeah, absolutely. Having the analog versus the digital, I think there's absolutely a place for creatives with analog. It should not all be digital.
Yeah, and that resonates with me as well. Because, a while ago, I was working with a coach and she was encouraging me to do like daily journaling. And one of the things she told me was, go out to Home Goods or Target or wherever you want to go and go find a notebook or a nice journal that speaks to you, that's pretty, that you like, and take that home. And then that's going to be your journal. And that's where you handwrite everything day to day. So I can definitely see, especially in the early part of the creative process, why that ability to handwrite and just sort of grab and jot notes and put your thoughts down in that way really is a benefit for that.
Absolutely. It's 100% true. And having something you like, because you don't want to grab the notebook and say, oh, this is ugly. You want it to be a nice piece that you enjoy picking up and writing in. And whether you're just jotting down what happened to you that day or jotting down ideas for something. So it's nice to have that and not only have it as a reference, but if you look, because I've been journaling since I was 9 years old. I have like a huge box of them, just from when I was a kid all the way to now I'm 31 years old. And you can just see your progress and how far you've come. So if you're jotting down, if you're doing something for your podcast and you look at it a year later, you go, wow, look how far I've come. And it's really nice to have that and to have it for inspiration too. Sometimes you go back and you see what you wrote and maybe you had an idea that didn't work at the time for whatever reason, but it's still a good idea. And you look back and you go, yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. I can use that now, or that'll work with what I'm trying to do for this project. So having that notebook, having a journal or whatever it is that you're jotting down to get your ideas and your thoughts out on paper, I think is just so important, not only for your reference and for using that to your advantage, but also as a stress reliever. So it works in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you decided, once you had the finished product typed up, you decided to self-publish your book. What was that experience like, and how did you come to that decision versus trying to shop it out to a publishing house?
So I didn't shop it out to a publishing house for a number of different reasons. Number one, I did not feel like getting rejected a million times by everybody and trying to find an agent. And it just wasn't for me at this point in my life. That's not to say if a publisher came to me that I wouldn't consider publishing it traditionally. I absolutely would. For this piece, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want anybody's input. I wanted it to be my own. So I did a lot of research on self-publishing. There are a lot of resources out there. Just if you go on Google or Pinterest or wherever, you can find so many different resources. And I just kept researching and what this meant and what that meant. So I self-published it through Amazon, and it was a long and arduous process of getting everything where it needed to be, because you have to make sure that your margins are correct. And then the cover, I think, was the biggest pain because you had to do it in Photoshop and you had margins of this and the bleed. And thank God my husband was able to actually help me with that and get that all set up for me, because I had no idea what I was doing with that. But I picked the picture, I designed the whole thing. But he clicked and moved and dragged and made sure everything was right for me. And he did a great job with it, and I was really happy with it. But I just self-published because it was the way that I felt was best for this book. And I'll continue to self-publish everything that I do in the future. I don't have any intention of shopping for an agent or shopping any publishing houses. But as I mentioned, if one approached me, I would absolutely welcome them with open arms and discuss that with them. But it was just nice to not have anybody saying to me, oh, you should change this, or this doesn't sound good, or I don't like this picture for the book. It turned out exactly the way I wanted it to. And that was really what I wanted for my first novel.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of authors self-publish these days. You don't need to go through the publisher anymore, and that self-publishing still lets you retain your creative vision overall. So I definitely see the benefits of that.
Oh, sure. And a lot of people think that, they don't understand the self-publishing. They're like, well, did you pay to have all these books created? And I said, no, with Amazon, Amazon makes it so easy to do it. They do everything for you. And when someone orders something, they print the book for the customer and they ship it out. So I literally don't have to do anything. Like whoever orders it just goes through and orders it like they're purchasing anything on Amazon, and it's Prime eligible. You can get it in 2 days, and you could be sitting on the on the beach with your book in a lounge chair and a nice cold drink and reading it. So it's really, Amazon made it so easy to get started. And to your point, it's so much easier to self-publish now than it was like 10 or 15 years ago. It's a completely different world now.
Yeah, I didn't know too much about how self-publishing works. So that's really cool to know that Amazon will actually print the book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And is it also available like on Kindle or e-reader? Do they do that too?
Absolutely. So it is available in paperback, and then it's also available on Kindle. So if people use e-readers, which a lot of people do, you can order it straight through there. Or if you prefer a paperback, you can do that as well, either way. But yeah, it was so eye-opening and just really interesting and really challenging for me to go through that whole process and go through researching a completely different world that I had no idea about. Now I could pretty much tell anybody anything they want to know about self-publishing, but it was really an educational experience, if anything.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank you for walking us through your whole process from getting the idea over to self-publishing. What would you say were some of the challenges you faced while you were either writing the book or trying to get the book published, and how did you overcome those?
So I definitely had my moments of crying because I felt like it was never going to get done. I will be the first to admit that I'm a very sensitive person and I get upset easily if I can't get something right. Yeah. So I think my biggest challenge, honestly, besides feeling like, a mess sometimes writing, was just time, because I do work full time and I devote, when I'm at work and I'm 100% at work. Mm-hmm. And when I'm home, that's when I'm the writer, not the business person, who I am in my corporate life. So I think my biggest challenge really was just time, devoting the time, sitting down and writing, sitting down and getting the motivation to write, because a lot of writers will tell you that they love to write. Like I can't imagine my life now without writing and my book and my ideas and everything. But sometimes you will do anything to avoid writing. Like I'll say to myself, all right, I want to get X amount of pages done this weekend. And then I'm thinking, maybe I should, I got to run some errands, or I got to go to the food store. And sometimes because you're just avoiding it so much, you will do anything to just try to avoid it as much as possible. So sometimes just forcing myself to sit for a bit and just do it, because once you're sitting and you get going, you're going. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, you just have to make yourself sit down and at least do something. And then when you feel tapped and you stop. But that was really, those are my two biggest challenges, just making sure that I stuck to a schedule and just making the time to do it, and making the time and devoting patience and resources and, setting the expectation for my friends that, hey, I'm not going to be around so much because I'm working on this and this is a part of my life and this is who I am. And everybody was super understanding about it, but it's just time. Time was the absolute biggest devil in this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you're working a full-time 9-to-5 job during the week, you come home, and I know as, working on the podcast, which I absolutely love to do, but, sometimes you come home and you're tired and there's other stuff to do. And like you said, it's literally once you start doing, you start writing, you start working on your hobby, it's easy to keep going from there. And sometimes the hardest part is literally just sitting yourself down and just getting started for the first couple minutes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The hardest part is sometimes just getting started. Like I think Mary Poppins said, a job begun is half done or something like that. And it's true because I'm a huge Disney nerd. So that's, I use a lot of Disney quotes and references, but it's true. Yeah. Sitting down and getting started and working on your side passion or your passion project is half the battle. And once you start getting in your groove and doing what you need to do, then you lose track of time and it's great. But, man, sometimes sitting down and just doing it and saying to yourself, okay, no more distractions, the laundry can wait or this can wait, just sit down and get it done. That, to your point, that's absolutely a huge problem sometimes.
Yeah. So, for a lot of people who are listening, I would imagine many people probably have a full-time job and then have other hobbies or passions that they want to get started with, but, maybe they're having a hard time getting started. What advice you have in terms of how to balance a day job versus your passion? And how do you do that? I know time you mentioned is a challenge.
Absolutely, it is. So I have somewhat of an advantage because I don't have children. And I know a lot of people do have children and they're trying to balance their family and their day job as well as the passion that they're working on. I would say if you're interested in whether it's writing a book or starting a podcast or creating some sort of side business or whatever, you have to make sure that you set the boundaries and make sure that you devote certain chunks of time. So like if maybe you have some time available on a Sunday, maybe even if it's just for an hour or two, maybe your spouse or a friend or a neighbor, somebody can take your kids out for a bit or can, come over and play with them while you get some work done. Or, you have to set those goals and those boundaries and work around your schedule. Or maybe after your kids go to sleep, you can start working a little bit, even if it's only for a little bit of time. I would say just don't give up and don't ever use time as the excuse, because you can say that you don't have enough time, but you can steal a few minutes. You can steal maybe a few minutes during your lunch break at work. You can go and, get lunch and work on something for a bit. So you got to find pockets of time here and there to work on whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, and just work how it works for you. If mornings are better, if evenings are better, you find those little pockets of time to get your things done. And that's the name of the game, is to just strategize and figure out what works for you and set boundaries and set goals and set your expectations. Maybe realize, all right, I'm not going to be able to type 100 pages up in 2 weeks. Maybe I'll be able to type up 10 pages in 2 weeks. And that's okay. Just don't quit. You just keep going, and you will eventually accomplish what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's great advice. Being really thoughtful about how to use your time. And even if you only have very small pockets of time, thinking, I'm going to do it during my lunch break, or I'll do it after the kids are in bed, or I'll do it early in the morning. Just sort of setting that out in your mind, because, as you said, if it's like, oh, I'll get to that someday. Well, like someday may never come. So it's being thoughtful about the time.
Right. And before you know it, the people, I think, and I was doing it too. Oh, when I'm done with college. Oh, when I'm married, when I buy a house, blah, blah, blah. But before you know it, you're older and maybe you don't have as much energy as you did. And maybe the passion isn't there anymore. And you're sitting there and you're like 90 years old going, oh, I should have written that book. I should have started that podcast. I should have, learned how to ski or whatever it is you're trying to do. So there's no time like the present. I don't think time should ever really be used as an excuse, because you could always find little pieces here and there. And, your kids are at soccer practice, maybe, all right, let me get a little bit of stuff done. Or, maybe waking up an extra 15 minutes earlier or something like that, maybe just to, answer a couple of emails or whatever it is you need to do. So just work within your schedule and set expectations, and don't beat yourself up if for some reason you're not moving as quickly as you want to, because it will happen if you just be persistent about it.
As you said, just stick to it and don't worry about your pacing, because, it's not a race. And as long as you start and keep going, you're still moving forward towards your goal. So, you've got your first novel out under your belt. What are your future goals for your writing? Are you writing another novel, or what else do you have coming down the pike?
So I am writing another novel. I'm really excited. It takes place in the same town that this first novel took place in. So it's in Ocean Corner. So it is still kind of beach themed. It's a little bit different than the first one. It's a different main character, so it's not a sequel. But she does live in the same world as the original main characters that I had in my first novel. So they all live in the same world, and they may or may not bump into each other at some point through this second novel. So I'm working on that, and I'm actually in the process of getting my website completed. I'm working with a great girl who is creating a website for me, and she's actually putting the finishing touches on that. So that'll be a place for if stores want to, purchase wholesale through me, because I am in 2 boutiques in New Jersey. So if anybody wants to purchase through the website, or they just want to learn more about me, or they want to read the blog that I'll have up there, that'll be another way for people to find me and connect with me. But the second novel right now is absolutely my main focus. I'm working really, really hard on that. I'm hoping to finish it at some point and get it published by next year.
Oh, that's great. So how can people get in touch with you now to learn more about your book? I know you're working on your website. By the time this episode airs, your website will probably be all done. So do you have a web address that you could share with us?
Sure. So my website will be seashells.com. So like the tongue twister, she sells seashells, but because my name is Gina and my close friends and family actually call me G, seashells.com. And you can also find me on Instagram. I'm super active on Instagram. My handle is, shockingly, G sells the seashells, all plural. So you can find me there. You can message me on there. You can follow me in my crazy things that I do, and you'll be able to get in touch with me on my website as well. There'll be a contact form and all of that. So those are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I'll put those links in the show notes of the podcast. And also your first novel, The Letters in the Old House, available through Amazon. So I'll put a direct link to that as well in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. So Gina, it was great to talk with you and learn about the writing process and what inspired you to get started and write your first novel and embark on your new writing journey. As we close out, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know or anything else that they can help or support you with?
Sure. So if you go to Amazon, you can find my book. My book is available on Amazon and Kindle and paperback. And I just want to tell your listeners, if there is something you've always wanted to do, there is no time like the present. Don't wait any longer. If you want to write that book, if you want to learn how to sing or play the piano or whatever it is you want to do, you can absolutely do it if you just put your mind to it. And you will absolutely not regret attempting whatever it is that you want to do. Always chase your childhood dreams. Don't give up on them, because those are the dreams that you had before the world told you what you should be doing and before you became an adult. That was when your imagination went rampant, and you just absolutely have to take the bull by the horns and just do it. That's the best advice I can give, is chase your childhood dreams. And if anybody tells you otherwise, forget them. You don't need that negativity in your life.
Great advice. Thank you again, Gina, for being on the podcast.
Carolyn, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks for listening to Beyond 6 Seconds. Please help us spread the word about this podcast. Share it with a friend, give us a shout out on your social media, or write a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. You can find all of our episodes on our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.